Hey, good morning, everybody. I I know what you're thinking as you're starting to log on this morning. You're probably starting to wonder, is Dan on vacation or what's going on this morning? And he's looking more casual, more relaxed. He's drinking coffee. He's not at home. He's not at the office. So I am located today at my parents' place down in Los Osos. We had been wanting to find a way to come down and visit with them for quite some time now, and so this was the weekend that we could set it aside. So we entered into their bubble, and that's where I'm at this point. So I'm located in their porch, just off of their home, and I can't move that bike, but there's their exercise bike and place where they hang out. I've got them locked away in a back room while I take over this space to talk to you this morning. And of course, they're watching along as well. It's a strange time, right? Because so many of us take these perpetual precautions not to interact with people in a way that would infect them. And yet, there's this need to be connected. And so we all have to kind of take those risks from time to time and connect to one another. This, of course, when we gather together on a Sunday morning, is risk free. There's no risk involved with you sitting on your sofa and saying hello to people via our live Facebook feed. If you're joining us this morning, shouting out to people, letting us know how you're doing as we continue to wrestle our way through this pandemic. Shout out to each other, use emoticons throughout the time together as a way to kind of generate a little energy as we spend some time this morning, focusing in on a particular theme that I have been it's been eating away at me a little bit this week, and so I'm gonna put it on your plate so it can feed you a little bit or uh, be a piece of the wisdom content that you chew on a bit and reflect on as well. So that's what we'll do today. I will one side note, Lori and I decided that we would not stay here on site while we visited my parents. So we tried out Hip Camp and we rented a small campsite down the road a bit. And that's been intriguing. I don't think either one of us are sleeping very well. So you just got to cut me some slack this morning. I'm at least here and you're here. So that's the most important part. All right. So let's get started this morning. I think one of the things that I wanted to start off with was this idea that we've all had to get used to for months now, and possibly throughout the fall and into the winter, this sort of capacity to close ourselves off from others, to withdraw rather than lean in, just to make sure that both we're safe and that we're ensuring the safety of others. That we know that this is a practice that we have to engage in for a time while we hopefully beat this virus, right? And so this is a practice that we're engaged in. We know it won't last forever, but it is a time and an extended time. And we're all feeling. We were in a conversation with some of our teenagers. Even teens are feeling like these practices that we've had to engage in are having their effect on us. That we're even a little nervous going out into public and interacting with people. We hesitate as we think about how we engage other humans, right? And yet we know that our species throughout its history has been completely dependent on and relies on the very fact that we're interconnected with each other, right? We're not the animal in the wilderness that could survive on our own. We only survive when we're interconnected with each other, whether it be extended family or clan or village life, ultimately civilization, that we coordinate and collaborate. In some ways, it's like the great philosophical tradition from Africa, that Ubuntu idea that the kids are going to be reflecting on in the next week. Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, right? That's just a beautiful concept that in some ways we've had to set on the shelf for a while. But we know deep down that none of us exist to themselves. We exist in a web of interconnectivity. And so, even though we're in this sense of pause and having to isolate, I think I was struck this last week by a phrase that popped out in our Mark study, and I wanted to spend some time reflecting on that. And that phrase is a phrase that comes out of a story that I'm going to share a little bit later. And that phrase is simply this: to be open. To be open. To be is an existential kind of understanding. To our being is this negotiation of complete openness. Openness to allow that which is within to flow to another, whether it be love or compassion or kindness or support or relationship, that we flow out from self to others, and we allow others to flow into us. That existential idea of be open is such a powerful idea that resonates with the spirit of Ubuntu. It resonates with the very physiology that we have of breathing in and breathing out, how we are open to receiving, and then we breathe out, expressing. That is the way we live, right? We live in that constant experience of openness to others, and openness to allow ourselves to be experienced by another as well. That, to me, is a powerful idea, and I want to just share with you some thoughts on that today. To get started, we always like to have a little centering ritual, and today, obviously a lot of us are thinking about the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who literally opened so many doors to so many women through her work in the legal system, and was one of the people that we admire for having the ability to say, how do we open society more fully to the place of women in our society? And you think about her life commitment to that cause for so long, that there is a deep sense of loss, not only for losing her, but also the legacy that she had created throughout a lifetime. I know Lori the other day mentioned a quote by her. Someone had asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? So when will you be happy that there's enough women on the Supreme Court? And Ruth responded, when there's 9. And everybody got to pause and thought, what do you mean by that? And she says, well, there have been 9 men forever, and you don't seem to complain about that. This idea that why have we constructed a world in which men are the wise ones that sort of hold our legal system together? It's just a beautiful quote to kind of help you see the kind of the wonderful imagination that Ruth brings to that cause, to say, wait a minute, why don't you pull back the veil of your own kind of gender biases here and realize that the Supreme Court could be full of women? Why would you even think twice about that? So I want to honor her today. Maybe you want to think about her today and kind of have some gratitude for her today. But I also want you to just have this moment where you experience a tethering, which is what ritual practice is often about. Tethering your breathing to this call to be open, like I said before. And so what I'm going to invite you to do, and for me to do too, is just to take a minute, and I'm going to use open palms, which for me is kind of a vulnerable position. It kind of feels like openness to me. And just to reflect for a moment on those experiences you've had, or those moments throughout your life that have opened you up to having a more maybe heartfelt, aware, insightful experience of life itself, right? Maybe it was a conversation with someone that meant a lot to you, and their words opened up a new reality for you. Maybe it was the birth of your child, right? That child born to you that all of a sudden just opened up some aspect of who you were that wasn't available to you before, as if a veil was lifted. Or for me, even the birth of grandchildren was a moment like that. It just created a new space inside of me that I didn't know existed, right? That's a way to feel like I'm being opened wider. I'm living more fully into this gift of life itself. And so I want you to just kind of, maybe there's going to be a moment that comes up for you, but maybe not. But then tether that to just 3 breaths that we take together. 3 breaths that remind us that we both breathe in the world and are open to all of those experiences, whatever they happen to be, sometimes painful, sometimes full of joy, but that they will shape and transform us. And then the breathing out, that we too offer ourselves as gift to the world. Okay, so just I'm going to put my palms open on my lap and sit quietly for a moment. Take some soft breaths, and then I'll guide us into 3 intentional breaths this morning. And once you feel yourself kind of calming down for a minute and settling into the space that you occupy as a beautiful human being on this planet we share, just feel the weight of your own body resting into the weight of Earth. Then I just invite you to be intentional about the next 3 breaths. And as you breathe in with gratitude, be grateful for all that you remain open to in life that moves into your being. And then with an out breath, all that you give back. As I move into the wonder of each day, may the way in which I breathe remind me to be open to the lives of others, and open to giving my life to the world in which I find myself. Amen. Well, thanks for that experience this morning. It even calms me down when I get to guide it. So I appreciate that. I appreciate being able to do it with you. You don't, if I think about it, I don't often do spiritual practices, right? This is the one time a week that I'm sort of required to do it with you. And just how calming and beautiful it can be to link some physical movement to the sort of wisdom or spiritual insight I want to foster is it's a practice that we don't often engage in. So thank you for taking the time to do that today. I wanted to think for a minute about how almost all the religious traditions that I'm aware of, even throughout history, they all have this kind of embedded in them, this kind of idea of revelation. Not revelation being the end that we think about sometimes, like Revelation is the last book of the Bible, the end of the world. Sometimes we link revelation to the ending, but really revelation is about a new beginning. It's a reveal. It's a moment of great reveal, of revelation, of something being drawn back or losing its capacity to be a filter or a lens through which you see. That dissipates and some new awareness comes into its being within you, and it's revealed to you, and you then see in a new way, right? This idea of revelation is really woven into the fabric of so many religious traditions. You see it in the poetry of Taoism. That's what I was trying to, there was a word I was trying to think of. Taoist poetry has that energy to it, right? It's revelatory in its simplicity. That's an example. You can see it in the parables of Jesus. Every parable is, if you will, has the seeds of revelation inside of it. That if you have ears to hear, you hear, and then you are transformed in the hearing. it becomes not just informative to you, but transformative for you. That's the intent of a parable. So you can see it in the world of parables. You can see it in Eastern traditions like Buddhism, when Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, sits under the Bodhi tree, right? And he, all of a sudden, by absorbing the world, he is enlightened and he awakens. And the invitation to wake up in Buddhism is a beautiful another example of that. I even think I've seen it a lot in indigenous practices of rites of passage, where you separate yourself from your comfortable setting and you move into a rite of passage. And in that rite, something is revealed to you. Maybe you find yourself in a new way, or find your place in the world in a new way. So over and over and over again, there's this idea in religions that there is this sense of capacity for revelation. Christianity, of course, has its fair share of it, as I said, in the parables, but you can also see it like a drumbeat in the life and teachings of Jesus. I mean, it's there almost in every moment of the way in which his life unfolds as it's recorded by the gospel writers. All of those moments when Jesus does healing, right? He says to someone who can't see, I'm going to give you sight. This shift from unable to see to being able to see. You see it in the deaf that are given ears to hear. You see it in the cripple that now have capacity to walk. You see it in the outcast who are then invited to be part of family or tribe or clan. Over and over and over again, you see this sense of something new being opened up for somebody through their experience with the wisdom and teachings and the behaviors of Jesus over and over again. So I just wanted to give you one quick story this morning. I'm realizing that this morning's going to go a little faster because I don't have as much content. That's what happens when you're traveling or not sleeping in a tent. So this is a scene out of, again, Mark's Gospel, since I've been working on that with a number of you. It's a great scene which leads to that phrase, be opened. And the scene begins when Jesus is having a big argument with the people who are super religious, sort of on their territory. And they're arguing about what's kosher. And the whole kosher system was a way of vetting out, and that which was vetted out by the people who were the religious leaders at the time, the Pharisees. They would vet what's acceptable to be open to or to be invited into and what was not. And in the conversation that Jesus has with the religious leaders and his own followers, he basically says, there is no such thing as kosher, right? There's nothing that can come into you that is going to defile you or make you impure. He shifts it around and it says it's more like how you give expression to yourself that causes that to happen. It's not about being open to the world. In some ways, I would say Jesus is almost on the brink in our time of saying there is nothing that is religious in particular. There is only life itself. That all of life holds spirit or wonder or truth or wisdom. It's not like we vet out what's appropriate in life and say, well, these things we can invite in so that we might be pure and holy or religious or pious. That's not the way Jesus is framing it. He says, no. There is no such thing as a requirement to filter that which you experience to only that which you think is worthy of a religious experience. So there is nothing like that. And the reason why I say that is on the heels of this idea that there is nothing kosher. There is no reason to put this filter on everything. Jesus then moves from the kind of the religious landscape and the conversation he's having in his hometown, and he moves across the lake into Gentile territory. And he is finding himself immersed in the crowds. And in Mark's gospel, the crowd is a metaphor or a term that Mark uses to mean like everybody. the mess of humanity. The crowd would be the people you agree with politically and the people you don't agree with politically. The crowd would be the wealthy and the poor. The crowd would be the religious and the unreligious. The crowd is just this mass of life energy, right, that's going on. And Jesus places himself now, since he said, there's no such thing as kosher, there's only life, he places himself in the heart of crowd. I love that idea, right? It's like I'm kind of reminded of it when I know it's a side journey, but now I'm starting to do that in my head. I love the idea that sometimes we have church on Sunday morning. We used to have church on Sunday morning, and then Lori and I sometimes would race to the farmers market, and we would see parishioners, wandering through the farmers market. And I just went from seeing them, full of joy in their pew on a Sunday morning, and now I see them full of joy in the crowd, right? Inside the farmers market, looking at fruits and vegetables and interacting, seeing kids running around. And the same beauty of capacity for joy and wonder and spirit was as present in the farmers market in Moraga as it was in the sanctuary in Lafayette for an hour, right? I think that's what's going on here. This idea of there is nothing that is kosher. Rather, there is life itself. At the end of this narrative, where Jesus is now inside the crowd, he finds a person inside crowd who is deaf, cannot hear, and he cannot speak. And it's to that person. He's not doing this in church. He's not doing this in a religious setting. He uses these terms, be open. And in that moment when he invites this kind of existential be open to this person, then the person can hear, and then the person finds their voice. You think about the breathing pattern that I linked you to before. The person can hear, and the person can give expression to life. The person can hear and absorb and experience and be open to the wonder of all that they have that's part of their life, and they can breathe, they can speak their truth, right? That rhythm of breathing in and breathing out is, in a sense, the invitation to be open to life. And my sense is that that's sort of what Jesus is saying, that the real religious experience is to have that capacity down at the farmer's market, or out on a walk on the beach, or remember when you used to be in the BART train? I mean, I don't care where you are. That's the religious capacity. That is the ruach, the breathing of God. That's some power. I think that's beautiful and powerful stuff. Another side story, Don Cupid, who I really love Don Cupid, one of my favorite, he's a religious philosopher in Britain, I think, British. And Don Cupid's kind of a formal, he's got the British accent, he's a formal scholar. I was at a conference one year, and Don Cupid was at the podium, and he was talking about his way of thinking about this, and he called it solar living. Solar living. That is, we live like the sun, right? We live like sunshine. We pour ourselves into life. And we, in a sense, we absorb the wonder of sunshine, and we pour ourselves into life just like the sun does until we burn out, right? It's just give yourself fully to life itself was Don Cupid's philosophy. And he was talking about this with a bunch of scholars. So they're all in their heads. And one of the scholars, the Q&A time, asked him, he's like I think he's probably 80 years old when I heard him. And they asked him, so what do you do? Do you have any spiritual practices or religious practices that connect you to this idea of solar living? And I didn't know what he was going to say, And so what he said, well, what I do is at least once a week, I walk out into an open field and I just lie down in the grass and I just feel the sunshine soaking in my body. And then, in a sense, I commit myself to give expression to all that's within as if I shine too like the sun. And he said, that's my religious practice. What a beautiful, what a beautiful way of thinking about that, in a sense, that idea of revelation, this idea of evolving, maturing, building greater capacity for health and wholeness is linked to that idea of just being open to receiving and expressing, to hearing and finding voice. And there's something deeply spiritual about that journey. And so my word of wisdom, that's not really mine, just borrowing it probably from religious traditions. My word of wisdom for you today is, how are you being open, even in times when we have to distance ourselves from each other, right? How do you find ways towards that? For those who have committed to participating in the racial justice activation circles that we've launched, how are we striving to be open, to hear the experiences of others, to allow it to sink into us like oxygen, and to be transformed by that experience, and then to find new language to give truth and more more of a robust sense of our collective diversity in the world? How are we breathing with that experience as a way of being open to it, right? Hearing and finding voice. For those in the Enneagram study on Monday night, as you learn more about others and yourselves, and the diversities of ways people manifest personality, how are you being open to all of that diversity and experiencing it? What's happening as it moves inside you and it fills up your lungs? And then how do you give expression to your own personality in a beautiful way? How do you pour yourself out like the sunshine? That's the invitation, I think. The invitation of what revelation is all about, right? This is how revelation works. It has the capacity of pulling back some things and opening up other things so that you might live in a new way. We've done that in our congregation around sexual orientation and gender identity. I remember having that experience when we invited Sumbul to come and talk to us when she wrote the book, The Muslim Next Door, and talked about the experience of being an Islamic woman and what that whole journey was like, especially in the moments when Islamophobia was so big, right? We had her talk to us, and all of a sudden we see people in a different way. That's what it means to be open. And I don't want to rush this, you could think about this, could that be what's really at the heart of the journey of the religious experience? Is this capacity for really just openness and the trust that the spirit of living God, if that's how you want to understand it, or the spirit of life, or just life itself, life itself breathes that way. And despite the dis-ease that we're navigating right now, or the dis-ease of political discourse that we're in right now, or the dis-ease of economic strain, whatever they happen to be, we still are required to breathe, to be open, so that we might be because we are together. Interesting, just a way to frame the spiritual journey. And so, if nothing is kosher, if nothing is religious, then what matters most is life matters, right? This experience of life is the invitation into the religious journey. Maybe just breathing is the first step into that journey. Amen. All right. Well, hopefully you've got a few insights along the way there. Certainly, I've been reflecting on it too. In some ways, thinking about how vulnerable am I? How porous is my soul to this breathing pattern? Can I trust myself more and more to it? Can I be more assertive about both absorbing the experience of others, allowing to let it sit, and then give expression in a new way? That practice that we started with, um, I just think it's something that we can be working on, particularly now, to help us as we start to move back into interactions with each other. Wouldn't it be wonderful if those interactions were now informed by a more kind of robust capacity for truly hearing, like the man in the story in the crowd? I'm open to hearing you now. I'm open to feeling you now, and I'm open to sharing my life with you in a new way. Would that be um, an outcome of this time together that would be um, almost like gift to world and to us? I hope so. I hope so. I'm going to go for it too. Geez. All right. So let me finish up with a couple of announcements today. We're at 30-minute mark. Then I'll get on the stationary bike and try to burn some calories. First one, right off the bat, confirmation is launching today. So 11 o'clock is confirmation hour. So my deepest gratitude to Carl and Craig for hosting that. This is the day it all begins. So if you're a parent or a grandparent or you know a confirmation student, remind them to jump onto that Zoom call today at 11. And Carl and Craig have quite a variety of ways in which they're going to tackle confirmation this year. So get in early, get in strong, be open to that journey together. That's happening today. Also, I would invite you. I didn't post anything from Martin on the music front today. And I did that because I forgot my laptop, but I also did that because I want you to go to the OSLC website, oslc.net, and then up at the top right corner, you'll see the YouTube channel. If you click on that YouTube channel, you need to learn how to explore our playlists. And the playlists are different categories of content that we've categorized for you. And you can find all the musical playlist. You can click on that playlist and see all the music that Martin has put together and kind of explore that. But we're starting to build also a playlist of experiences for you to do at home. The Time to Grieve moment is a way to kind of acknowledge all we've lost during the pandemic. And now the new in-home communion service is there as well. The first iteration of that has a kind of a long explanation, so it's a little bit longer service than you might want to do over and over again. But the second iteration of that will be a more truncated, just communion service only. But it's just a beautiful way to say, grab some bread and some wine or crackers and grape juice or something for your family. Just sit down with that video and feel like you're part of the great communion. And that can be a process that you can engage in. It allows you to find that. And then we've got a new playlist for kids that we're starting to build links to the content that they'll be exploring at home with the Holy Ground project kits that go home for them to work on. So all that's there, and it's just good for you to know how to access it. So take some time to do that. I think the only other thing I would say is, because we're kind of in extended, we got to keep going with sort of being disconnected from each other. If someone pops in your head that you used to sit next to in church on a Sunday morning, you know, when you used to sit in church on Sunday morning, you found your spot in your pew, and you look over and there's Bill or Joan or whoever, and you look over here and there's such and such, and you would connect briefly. I think now's the time, given we know we're locking down into fall a little bit, it's going to maybe get a little bit harder and harder to kind of casually interact with people as we get ready for fall and winter, just to reach out with an email or a phone call and say, hey, I missed seeing you in church on Sunday morning, or I just calling to catch up and see how you're doing. Just some simple web of connectivity can be very deeply meaningful in a time like this. Even if you leave a voicemail, right? It's just some way to go, hey, someone's thinking about me. And how warm and wonderful that is. Or I get a moment to share my life with somebody else, 10 minutes on the phone or via an email. I think we need to do a little bit of that in the weeks ahead, and particularly the months ahead. Okay, so that's it for today. we'll wrap up down here, have lunch, and then drive home today. Thanks for being with me in my mom and dad's house. Lovely to be with you in Los Osos as the sun begins to rise a little bit, and I reflect on what it means uh, to engage in solar living, to both absorb sun and then give full expression to all that stirs within me. Maybe that is the joy of the true religious path, is finding your way into the very gift that is life itself. All right, all. Take care.